Basically just a little cleanup grinding. Just to, show that there's a bit of progress. I got a lot of grinding to do on all 3 sets before I start cutting them. I don't know that I don't need to take all the rust off or anything back here, but in the area where I'm going to be welding, I will have to clear that off. But I'm using the stone because I need aggressive grinding. I'll just try to be careful as I start to get down to the surface finish and that stuff, that I don't cut too deep. And then I can always pull out a flap wheel or something like that to get down the last of it. So you see how it kind of feathers out there as you get close. So that's basically what you're looking for. And you can tilt it up, it gets a little more aggressive, and then you can flatten it out as you start getting closer. Spread the grinding area so it doesn't cut quite so fast. And I'm moving it back and forth quickly. It's whatever you're comfortable with, whatever. But one, it keeps it cooling. Okay, you don't get hot spots from sitting in one spot. And 2, it lets me see what I'm doing. This thing does grind down pretty quick, and I've got a real light touch on it right now. So, if I want to push down hard in the center there, it'll grind pretty quick. And as I said earlier, this is pretty much for demonstration right here, because this section's getting cut out. So I'm really not going to worry too much about grinding any of that down right there. So, the bottom side, that's done for now until I get it cut. And then once it's cut, I've got to go in and do some grinding and sanding anyway to deburr the edges and that kind of stuff, make parts fit. That's when I'll worry about blending in the grinding marks and stuff like that. Or I'll wait until after the welding, because I got to come back and do more cleanup grinding and that kind of stuff then. So this is where I got with the belt grinder. The belt grinder, yeah, the big beefy one. I could take that down further, make it more like this, but I'm here right now with this one, so I'll just do a little grinding with it. Close enough for now, and like I said, I did cut a little too deep in a couple spots. I'll worry about touching those up after the fact, during the welding, because, offhand right now, that may get cut out. I'm not exactly sure offhand. I think it's about that, so it'll probably still be there, but it can get cleaned up later. So that's the tedious job of grinding. Now, I've got a couple here that it's a snug fit to start with, and they're a little deformed or have a little burr or something. So okay, and I'm fine with that kind of fit. I don't really want it any looser than I need to make it, and I'm feeding it in from the wrong side. It actually goes in this side. There we go. Okay. One of the differences between the arms for the 320 look very similar. They're narrower up here. This is a 521 or 620 arm. Came from Dave's. It's a 521 arm. The hole here, okay, this hole here is big enough that the bolt goes into it, and then when it tightens down, it squeezes the arm a little bit, and the load is on the shoulder of the bolt, not on the arm. Okay, on a 320, that hole is big enough for the bolt, and the shoulder will stop up against it. Okay, so it gets pinched in between the two. One of the few differences. The other difference is too is that the shock absorber mount on a 320 is a lot narrower. In order to get a replacement shock for them, you either have to change the shock mount or modify the shock. You know, basically, it's hard to find one short enough. These are hard bodies. These are actually a little too long, but they work with the Z'd control arms. But basically, you end up having to go in here and cut these down narrower in order to fit on a 320. So, okay. So I'll go through and clean up a few more of those. Basically what I need to do is, this is my reference point, okay, for my measuring jig. But they all get measured up on this side. And just as a note, I can't, it goes on the bottom side here, because the top side, the bandsaw blade would end up cutting this end off here. So it's set right there, and it basically just comes down and just touches that. So I'll get a scribe and mark those. So I'll go through and make sure the holes will fit the pin, go through and mark them all, and we'll start doing some cutting on the bandsaw and cut these apart. So I basically put the Sharpie mark in there because it's just a little bit easier to see, you know, and pick up on real quick. If you get a really sharp Sharpie, or if you want, you can actually go back through and make the Sharpie line extra thick, and basically then it's acting like die chem. You can spray die chem on it, doesn't matter, you got to grind it back off if you want to weld it. And I'm using a carbide tipped scribe. It gets in there easier than some of the other ones I have, so I just hold it down and alright, see, since I widened up the blue lines, it makes it stand out there a whole lot nicer. Well, here's the first one that was marked. And let's see if we can... These quick release C-clamps, they're Harbor Freight. I'd cut them and use them. They're pretty cheap. So we'll get that jig piece in there. Well, there we go. That's in the groove it's supposed to be in. That is so much more secure than how I did it last time. Gotta watch the cutting order. The back one here does not go all the way through. These two do go all the way through. Okay? But this part is not held down. Okay? It's not captured. It's captured back here. So if I make this back cut first, or the middle cut here rather, this piece will fall off, and then I'll have a hell of a time cutting that. So I can cut the first one, cut the second one, then come back and cut the third one. And I think that's probably how I'm going to do it. So we'll let the blade down here a little bit closer so we can line it up a little better. The reason for this cut here, one, the plate that I'm putting in here is going to add a 1/4 inch. Okay. Actually, I should probably show that better up on the bench, but I'll record it here. If I don't think about it later, it's done. The first one here severs it off. Now, a 1/4 inch plate goes on the end of this one, and that same plate welds on this one. So I need to take out a minimum of a 1/4 inch. Okay, I take out the extra 3/8 of an inch or so because of the change in the upper control arm. Now, on a stock ride height vehicle, the upper control arm is down a little bit. Okay, so by putting these on, that could actually create more positive camber, but that can be shimmed out easy enough. If the person drops the vehicle and lowers the torsion bars at all, then the arm starts swinging inward. The upper control arm swings inward and shortens. Okay, the arm can't be lengthened. So I make these arms just a little bit shorter, and you know, a lot of the guys that are running the lowered rigs and stuff like that typically have wider rims on them and stuff like that, wider tires. So pulling this in and then shimming the upper end a little bit just helps to maintain wheel clearance, make sure there isn't any issue there, and that the camber can still be adjusted to neutral. I suppose in some in some extreme drops, it may be negative period, but I'm only looking to put these on vehicles with stock ride height, basically. So let's finish the cut. Okay, I went down till it just nicked. That's as far down as I can go. So let's move it to the next spot. Looks like the one I'm clamping, and I might have to take a peek at that later, but looks like it's raising it up a bit. As long as it doesn't twist it this way, I don't care for right now. These next two cuts are going to be completely off. See, I almost did that. I lined up on this one. I would have shot myself in the foot. I need to line up on that first one. And yes, by the time I get cut all the way through, I will be cutting down into my weld jig. So if I see any grief with that, I will be welding it up some more when I go to weld these. I'd point out something while I'm doing this. As you start getting these pieces cut apart, you know, the question is sheesh, okay, how do you remember or keep track of, you know, which one's which? You know, they're both ground there. What's top, bottom? Okay, well, keep in mind, this washer is what locates the arm that goes on here that connects with the torsion bar. This bolt has to go in this direction and anchors with that. So the torsion bar is butted right up against this, basically. Okay, so then we know this is the back of the arm. Okay, which is top, which is bottom. There really isn't any way to tell the way they are, except for the fact that when you cut it apart, you cut it from the top, okay? You know, we cut it from here. Okay, so now this doesn't look right, okay, but keep in mind that one of these sections got cut out of here. And I can tell from the grind marks there, that one's not it. Oop, there's the blue mark. Oh, that one looks like it lines up better. So you can see the grinding stops here before it gets to this one. So that's why it kind of looks a little weird there. But anyway, you cut from the top, so then you know this is the top. This is the sway bar mount. The sway bar mount's on the front. So it can't be this top torsion bar. Put it back together like this, your sway bar's in the mount, in the rear rather. Sway bar mount's in the rear. That's not going to be good. So even though this one kind of looks like it goes back together more than the other one, that's an illusion because of the piece that's missing. So anyway, if I try to mark them and stuff like that, so like here, I'll put DP, I'll put an arrow up, and this is the left. So I'll put that on there, and I can do the same thing over here. Now when I start welding, some of this is going to disappear, but by the time I put it together and tack it, it'll be pretty obvious which one's which. So, but that way it'll be real easy if I start moving things around to figure out which one's which. And these silver Sharpies are awesome for marking this kind of stuff. Alright, I had to switch cameras for, I filled up the memory card. It's going to take forever to download. Yeah, anyway, so I'm on a different camera, but I just had a couple clips here to record. So it doesn't quite cut all the way to the bottom because of the angle of the blade going through here. Okay, so I just nicked here. So I'm on the small saw because I've got a much bigger table here to cut with. So there's two things I need to do. I need to cut that down to the bottom there, and then I need to slice it out so I end up with this piece coming off, because this creates the pocket for the shock absorber. That's it for this piece. Basically just got to do some wire wheeling or some touch-up grinding, fit some parts, and clean up the surfaces where I'm going to weld. So now I just got to cut all the rest of them. Well, now comes a bit of fun, trying to figure out exactly how I put these together last time. There's still some grinding and cleanup and stuff like that, but I really kind of need to do a little test fitting. And here, you know, it only goes in about halfway through the metal, okay? But if I turn it around like this, it's exactly the same, but it's over halfway through the metal, so I don't have to worry about it moving a tiny bit and popping out. I actually was doing it that way on the saw when I did the cutting. And if these pieces look funny, it's because they are the rejects, you know, so like that one there is that. I had it cut wrong. So I just used basically a whole order of parts to make the jig. I didn't use the whole order, but I just used that order for jigs and stuff like that instead of just throwing it away or whatever. Okay, so now this goes in there. The little screws hold that in nice and square. These pieces go in here, and they typically require just a little touch-up and cleanup. And this piece basically is what I use to align those. Now these have step in them, so it goes into that hole, and that way it's nice and registered. So the hole is off-centered slightly, so I put it up. What that does is that helps keep the, if I had it perfectly in the center, I'd have more trouble with the bottom of the shock being right on this flat part here. So I raised that up a little bit. And these need to get drilled out still to have the proper size. I need to drill them because then what I'll be doing is I'll be using this to line all the pieces up with the holes at the same time. So this piece, okay, I need to go through and clearance all of these. I can either grind the bracket down, pull a lot easier to hold the bracket, grind the bracket, than to try to do the lower control arm. So I'll put a little bit of a radius there on the end to make some room there. Looks like I might have to trim that off a little bit. Good chance what happened was I cut to the wrong side of the kerf. I couldn't remember, so anyway, I'll probably have to tweak that a little bit. So let's just flip that out of the way there for a second. That piece interlocks in there. This piece goes down in here, and once I drill the when I tack that piece in, it will, I'll center it and hold it there, and that actually keeps it in just a little bit. Okay, so there will actually be a bit of an air gap between them, but that's how I get it to where the shock absorber is in there as snug as possible. So, okay, the other piece, I'm gonna have to take the wing nut off maybe. Anyway, you can see this piece, if you get an idea there, it goes down into the end of the lower control arm here. And it does that to help add for the gusseting. Now I can't do it on this side because this is the side that has the big arm that goes through, that goes in, bolts to that bolt hole that this is running through for the torsion bar, and that's what does all that. So okay, well, it looks like that one went together okay. It needs some clearance grinding as well. You know, I could probably do it just like that. Once I welded it, you wouldn't really be able to tell, but I'd rather get the fit even a bit closer. Now, something else I had to do last time, and I'm not exactly sure if I want to do it sooner or later, but when the shock absorber goes down in there, this is plasma cut in here, or laser cut into the part or whatever, to allow some clearance for when the shock leans over. Okay? So when the shock goes down inside there and leans like that, you can see that if I didn't have that there, you know, I'd lose that much more lean. So I get that. I may end up having to grind that down. But I got to do basically the same thing on the back here as well, so that the shock has room to lean backwards without hitting right here. Last time I did it on the mill with a roughing end mill, holding it at an angle. Not quite positive how I'm going to do it this time. I may just do it on the belt grinder. We'll see. Alright, I think I'll probably just start prepping parts.